Hi, everybody, and welcome back to our Facebook Live. My name is Dayana Romero, and I'm a registered psychotherapist.
My name is Richard, and I'm also a registered psychotherapist qualified.
And today we're going to be talking about, as you know, last week we spoke about couples therapy or couples counseling, however you want to call it. And we discussed that there's different pillars that exist within a relationship in order to help keep a relationship together. And because there are four that we've been able to identify, we decided for this week to break down the first one and to be able to dive more into it, and in the event that anybody has any more questions about it. So for this week, we're going to be talking about friendship and why that's so important in a relationship.
Well, and I remember, Dana, when you were starting to sort of put these pillars together, I think it was a couple of years ago. You had, I think you had started with friendship, and I think that's why we sort of decided that should be the first one that we discussed, because it kind of seemed like from friendship the other pillars kind of almost, I want to say, like naturally manifested.
And I find it interesting because I remember in all my years of being in school and this was like eons ago, right? Like I read the Bible to reminisce. So back in the dinosaur age. Don't ever remember them ever talking about friendship being an important part of a relationship. I don't know if they discussed that where you were in school.
No.
Yeah, I know they discussed, things about like um, how to pay bills together, how to deal with each other's family. They briefly talked about sex. It was almost non-existent, to be honest with you. And I kind of feel like they never actually went deep into what actually forms a relationship. I
I was
remember.
just going to say, I don't.
No, they're more about if you have this problem, this is what you do. That's
Yeah.
probably what we got, right? But I recently learned that when you look at a relationship, if you go to couples counseling, and I like the way, not learned, but I like the way the person said it, if the only thing you're focusing on is the couple's problems and not the friendship, then you're never really bringing forth a solution, right?
Mhm.
Because out of friendship is how we learn to interact with each other. And the reason why we eventually become, or you should become, best friends with your partner is because together that you guys have a bond that's much closer than the average person or the average friend you have, pardon me, around you. So I don't ever really remember in school them teaching us about this.
And I think one of the things is, like we were saying, it kind of started with friendship, and I think all the pillars that were developed that you had mentioned, I think are important. But I want to say, if I had to like kind of like choose one, I would have to say friendship is one of like the big ones, right? Because I feel like if friendship doesn't exist, the other ones kind of can't exist, right? Like I think it kind of has to start off with that friendship component. And as we were both kind of saying, it seems like, say, with training, therapists are kind of taught these are all the reasons why people come in to see, whether it be money, in-laws, kids, which are like the three big ones that come up. I want to say sex is another one that is a big one that comes up, but a lot of people are kind of like hesitant to bring it up because it's kind of like taboo. But we want to really draw on a lot of the strengths that couples have, because again, all sort of individuals who come in for treatment have strengths, right? And that's why they're still here. They've been managing whatever difficulties they're facing in life. Maybe they're not managing them super well, but they're managing them. They're using strengths that they already have, and sort of instead of developing new strengths, let's for there to be progression.
Okay. Ooh, pardon me. Thank you. And I think the reason why friendship is so important, because I think you just said the key word, it is the core of a relationship. Have you ever like had friends or even patients? But if you mostly look at your friends, I realize the friends that I have that when they're in a relationship to the core are best friends, their relationships tend to work out better than the other ones who were just simply together or married to each other. Because then at that point, they're almost like roommates versus being actual, partners to each other. So when we look at friendship, and so then let's dive into that. What actually makes a best friend in your relationship? And I know in the next couple of weeks we'll be talking about more of the components that put it together. But the main thing, when you think about a best friend growing up, what was that person, right? It was that person you always ran to talk to about everything, to call about everything, to divulge ideas with, to use as a sounding board. As well as it was that person probably when something heartbreaking happened, you went and you spoke to them about it. And you always felt from the friend, and I think the main component that you felt from that friendship was you felt safe.
Mm.
You felt like no matter what you told them, your friend wasn't going to judge you negatively. Sure, a good friend will tell you when you're acting up, like, hey, you're being pretty stupid, you have to change that. Because the friendship, if your friendship is very well developed with that best friend, you're able to be like, instead of, oh my God, I can't believe you said that to you, you're like, oh my God, I appreciate you saying that to me.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It changes from being an attack to being an actual correction in your life. And I think when you look at a best friend relationship, that simulates very much what it looks like in a partnership when you're actually with somebody in a romantic relationship. Because it should be that you should be able to go to your partner and tell them things and not feel attacked, but feel, that you are heard, that you're being supported, and that they're welcoming to any and all things you're saying to them, and that you're welcoming to the information they're giving you back. Give it that again, it's not attacking information, but it's corrective and restorative information.
Mm-hmm. And I think that really starts to kind of get onto the border of trust, which is another pillar I know that you had mentioned. So I'm trying to kind of stay away from trust and that because we're going to have a whole live Facebook Live just on trust. But I want to say, like, with friendship, when I'm thinking about best friends, or I'm thinking about even just, I don't want to say just friends, because I find the idea of my best friend is a kind of a problematic concept. Because if people say, well, who's your best friend? I say, well, I have multiple, like, best friends. But with friendship, I want to say kind of like at base, there's at least similar interests. There's similar values. Sort of the character and personality comes together of the individual. I know we talked about, like, say, with leadership, especially when it came to, say, like, selection. For, like, say, if when we talk about, say, being a leader, right? Oftentimes we don't highlight, say, the leader needing to build a winning team, right? When we want to look at, say, relationships, we want to, say, build those friendships instead of bringing, again, the character and personality components of friendship. I think we want to see a lot of those similarities coming about as well, because sort of when we look at couples, well, what draws the two people together, and sort of think, hey, having a relationship with this person seems like a good idea.
You know what? And I also think part of also when you look at the relationship, like, I agree with you, it's also what draws them together, but it's also what keeps them together in the event of an adversity. Because you know what? I heard somebody once say, you don't really know who you're dating until you have your first fight. Because it's in there that you'll actually see who they are, because what comes out of that isn't personality, it's their actual character. So if you're in a relationship with someone, whether it be even friendship or romantic, platonic or romantic, and when you guys get into a fight, what's coming out of them is something really, vile or despicable or very disrespectful. You know who this person is right there to the core. So that means when everything's okay, what you're looking at is an individual who, when you look at the actual aspect of the friendship, if you really look at it, depending what's coming out of their mouth during that argument, you're going to see whether that relationship is very, like, surface, like deep as a puddle, or whether there's actually depth to it.
I always like when you use that analogy, deep as a puddle.
Yeah.
It's always one of my favorites. I think when you're looking at, say, those friendships as well and things like that, and you're talking about, like, say, that first fight. I think that's actually really important. I think it's a really important point that you brought up, because and again, I think you're going to see me keep going more towards, say, team building and things like that. I guess it's just my sort of military mind.
But it's true though.
But it's the same idea that, say, I like the idea with, say, selection. Say, if you're building a team or things like that, the best way to sort of see how people react, see what kind of person, say, you're hiring on to a business, or see what kind of person, say, you're preparing to go to, overseas with, or something like that, is you want to see them under pressure. You want to see them strained, right? Because again, that's when a lot of the true character is going to come out. Because of course, when somebody comes in for, say, an interview and it's a relaxed setting, maybe it's in, a nice office or things like that, they're usually not stressed. But when you kind of put pressure under them, you put deadlines, you put, for me, again, this is one of the reasons why I like having interns at the practice, right? Because they come in, they're bringing in new knowledge, right? Because they're still in school or things like that. They have new knowledge, and you get to put them under pressure, right? Because they're doing their placement, and then say they're actually interacting with clients and things like that, and then you get to kind of see how do they respond when, say, shit hits the fan and things like that, right? And I think that kind of ties into what you're talking about with, say, couples. When you see two couples together, say, how do they respond to one another? Not when times are good, but when times are shitty.
You've heard me talk about Jen before, right? And many years ago, she had once said something that actually made really good sense. And I remember when I told you one day, you're like, oh, that's actually a really good analogy. She had said, when you look at, let's take, for example, like a marriage or like a common law relationship, right? You're living with the person, right? She's saying, when you look at that, you have to see that as a partnership, right? In a two people partnership. You have the two people involved in this relationship. And within that relationship is the partnership. And within that partnership, there are products that are going to be built in that. So, for example, finances, housing, children, stuff like that, right? And she had said, relationships are like businesses. You have to be able to have both people who are in there who have good communication, but also have good relations with each other. Because at the ending, since they're going to be managing, the business, the relationship, the children, let's say you have them, the housing, the finances, if these two people do not have a solid, good working relationship, or let's say if you look at it from an actual romantic relationship, do not have a solid, best friend relationship, these other things are eventually going to crumble, because then you or I are never going to agree on what our fundamental principles are in regards to these things that we are producing in the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So in a business like this one that we run, you and I have to agree on how the finances are being handled, how the interns are being handled, how the staff is being handled, how we're being handled. Sure, there are sometimes you might see things one way and I'll see it another, but that has never led us into a fight where we're like, well, you know what, fine, that's what you're going to do. You could go do that and I'm going to go do that. Because what would happen? That would end up, causing severe issues in the business. However, people take that behavior doing a relationship. Well, that's how you want to do it. You go ahead and you go do that, Richard. I'm going to go do this. And how does that work out?
Mm-hmm.
It never does. You actually end up having those people in counseling saying, he
I was
believes.
just gonna say, those are the ones
He believes this, and and they believe that. So, here we are. And she had said, if you're able to look at your relationship as a business, mentality,
Mm-hmm.
you'll stop doing the stupid shit that you end up doing in your romantic relationship. Because again, in your romantic relationship, we think we can get away with that. Fine, you do this and I'll do that. But in a business relationship, you and I both know if you say, well, I'm going to go this and I'm going to go do that, that'll probably cost us a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
So,
even the business
will suffer. So you and I, if ever we can't come to an agreement, we're like, okay, what is the best solution for us so that it works not just for you and not just for me, but for everybody who is part of this, which include, again, the children would be the staff, the product would be the patients, and as well as the financing,
Mm-hmm.
right? You have to be able to interchange those words to whatever type of relationship you're looking at. And I remember her saying that, and I thought, wow, that's actually a really good analogy. If you keep looking at your relationship as that, like this is also a business relationship, you won't make these because they come down to being selfish decisions.
Mm-hmm. Well, the way I kind of see it again is, say, if we're looking at a relationship, just the same as again, putting my helmet back on. I'm thinking
with the chin strap.
Yeah, huh?
With the chin strap.
Obviously, right? Fucking Hollywood movies. So the way I kind of see it is again, it's the same with, like, say, a fire team. It's the same with a section. It's the same with a regiment. It's the same with an army group, right? It's not so much as me, the individual, or say you and I, right? It's the mission. It's the objective, right? What supersedes yourself or myself? It's, say, that relationship, right? So, like, say, if we're bringing in the business, right? It's kind of the idea that it's not so much what are my interests and what are your interests. I always want to look at what is the interest of the business, right? I want to look at the business, say, in a purely legal perspective, in the sense that the business is its own entity, right? So for me, the way I see it is, if it's not in the best interests of the business, I'm not really interested in my interests, because if my interests don't line up with the business's interests, then there's a conflict. And I'm going to say, you got to have to kind of detach and say, well, the interests of the business kind of have to supersede mine. And I think in a sense it's the same in a relationship, to the extent that, say, it's not so much what are my interests and what are their interests, right? It's sort of us as a couple, us as, say, a friendship, right? What do we need to keep this friendship going? What are the interests of this, again, this friendship, this relationship?
I once heard somebody say they were in the middle of an argument, and the guy looked at his wife and he says, "Look, I'm going to ask you something right now. Do you want to be right or do we want to be effective? Pick, and that'll determine this argument."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Damn, that's pretty powerful." And I remember him just saying that, and I just stared at him, and it was a friend of mine telling a story, and I was like, "Wow, that was actually pretty powerful," because I had never, and I can't remember how many years ago this was, but I had never looked at something that way. Because many times in an argument, what is it we seek to do is to be right versus being effective, because our egos get in the way. And I remember thinking about that, and even now implementing that as well in my mind when it comes to business. I always think the same thing. Do I want to be right or do we want to be effective? Which one will this come down to? And so when you transfer that over into relationships, it makes total sense, because a lot of the arguments that we end up having, especially in relationships, end up being because our egos get in the way of the friendship. Because I need to be right and I want it my way because I know best. And what was it? You heard me once say that joke. Well, then if I agree with you, then we both be wrong, right? And while that's a joke, I remember you and I were always joking about something like that. But at the ending of the day, though, when you actually apply it to a romantic relationship, individuals very much many times think that way. And so part of being in a romantic relationship with someone is being able to put aside your ego and determine what's best for the couple versus what's best for me. And this is where you heard me last week talk about, John Nash, equilibrium theory, which is it's about both people, leaving the table, feeling satisfied. That doesn't mean that you're both walking away with exactly what you wanted, because that's not realistic. Never you're ever going to go into any sort of negotiation, whether it be business or relationship, and you're going to come out getting exactly what you wanted. You're going to have to, it's the give and take, right? And I was just actually recently listening to this rabbi, and the rabbi was saying the biggest problems we have and he was talking about a marriage. He was saying is that the I comes in too much versus the we. And so he gave us an example. He was saying, if you look at, and I'm gonna go biblical here for anybody who might know this. He was talking about, in the Bible, it says that when God created Eve, he said, it is not good for man to be alone. And he said the reason why, and then if you know anything about Hebrew and the word tov, he was breaking it all down, like, what it means and whatever. And I'm not going to get into that because I am not completely Hebrew literate. I'm more illiterate than anything. But what he
English
was... Please, do tell everybody how you feel.
I'm not laughing.
So, so what he was saying was, the reason why it says it is not good for man to be alone is because when you are a single individual, and again, man or woman, it doesn't matter, right? But we're going to just use the term man as interchangeable. When you are a single individual, who's the only person you think about? You, right? Because there's no other partner at you at that moment. So you generally end up doing a lot of the taking. So in the aspect that there is nobody else who you're giving to, so anything you get out of, other people is more, them giving you something. But he was saying, but when you end up being in a relationship, the taking has to be put to the side, and you have to also enter into the giving, because now you are part of an actual unit. And being part of a unit, and you know this as well, being part of the military, there's where you start doing the give and the take, because once you enter into a unit, you are now serving. You're there to be part, and not subservient, and not saying either you're being somebody's maid or butler. Let's be straight about that, right? But serving in the aspect that...
important clarification.
Yeah, in the aspect that you are there because you're looking at what are their wants and what are their needs. So now you're not only always considered about yours, because it makes sense. Think about it, when you're single. What the hell do you care what anybody else thinks, right? Sure, you have your friendships and whatever. But at the end of the day, when you wake up in the morning, you think about, okay, what am I going to do today for me? How is this going to work for me? What are my needs? What are my wants? How do I fulfill those today? And that's quite normal thinking. It should be. That's how you look after yourself. But once you're in a relationship, now you're thinking, okay, what does my partner need? What does my partner want? And can I reach those goals or those things that they need? And in return, your partner should be considering what does he or she need and what does he or she want in the same way. But when you are just you, that makes total sense. But if you continue acting that way while you are in a relationship, and you've probably heard me say this before to patients, you're basically a bachelor in a relationship or a bachelor in a marriage. And if you enter that type of mentality, you're on your way to a breakup or a divorce because you can't enter into just the taking and never being part of the giving. You might as well just stay single for that. Because the only person then you're actually putting a lot of heartache through is not only yourself, but the other individual you're with, because then you're not being truthful as to where you emotionally are, which then brings us back to, my lows and asking for bread at Home Depot.
Yeah.
Because then you're not emotionally available because you're still in the taking mentality versus in the giving mentality. And I found that to be really interesting. The rabbi broke that down. And he was saying, and so that's why it's not good for an individual, especially in the religious realm, to be alone, because they never enter into that mentality of serving. They're always about themselves. And what he said actually, and it doesn't mean the person is selfish. It just totally makes sense. That is how we are when we're single.
A big thing that comes from Kingdom versus service before self, right?
Exactly.
But
and even biblically speaking, that is what's preached. It's service before self.
But when you were saying you were gonna get all biblical and everything like that, I thought you were going to bring up that that I am I and you are you and things like that. Which I was hoping you were going to, because
I could, if you want, I could just interject it in there.
I was gonna say, if you could actually explain that, because I've actually used that with some clients as well, and I've sent the video of the rabbi as well. And a lot of people thought it was really effective. A few people said, like, I had to listen to it twice because it kind of got like semantically confusing.
Yeah.
But
so basically, what that one talks about is, and again, remember what we just talked about earlier was about being, and hold on, let me finish that one off by saying the whole reason why you want to be in a giving position, because being best friends, think about when you have a best friend, that's exactly where you're at, right? You're in a giving position with that friend because they're giving you and you're giving them.
So there's reciprocity, right?
Exactly. Oh. It's that's what it is. It's a back and forth. It's a give and a take. And generally, if you become best friends with somebody, that's exactly what you're in. If you're not, eventually, again, you're deep as a puddle, and who the hell cares? That's not actually your best friend. That's just somebody who's fulfilling your self need.
Parasitic.
Exactly. That it is. It becomes parasitic. Now for this one, and thank you for reminding me of that. So another time I was listening to the same rabbi actually. That's actually, I think
could you remind me of his name, because I've heard him too. He has a lot of actually pretty good.
I can't remember his name right now. I'll have Angela Google the I am I and you are you rabbi. And so what he said was, and I don't know it in Hebrew, so I'll say it in English.
I think most of the audience don't speak Hebrew.
Yeah, so it works out. Helpful. So what he said was, if I am I because you are you, then I am not I and you are not you. But if I am I because I am I and you are you because you are you, then I am I and you are you. And basically what that's saying is that being
part... Give us a summarization, because
yeah.
I know a lot of people get confused.
I know, because semantically speaking, it gets totally confused. And so basically, and you know what, and we'll have Angela put it up there as well once she finds it. So basically what it's saying is, in a relationship, you also want to be careful that you don't cross the boundaries of being a giver or taker to it being codependent, right? And that's another thing you want to look at when you're talking about best friends. You should never be codependent on your best friend. And again, from now on, using the term best friend, I'm going to talk about that in a romantic relationship, because this is what this segment is about. So basically, it should be, I am Dayana, as an example. I'm going to use you as an example, and you are Richard. So, Menachem Mendel so we're going to have her put that up, so I won't butcher the name there. So basically, it should be, if I am Dayana and you are Richard, then you continue to be Richard and I continue to be Dayana, because my life and my life expectancy, my life, my everything does not determine on you. And your life expectancy does not determine. And but rely on each other for emotional support, for spiritual support, for physical support, for mental support.
Mhm.
But it should never be that because you are not around or you aren't able to help me, that all of a sudden, I can't breathe because I have no air. Because if the relationship becomes like that, that becomes a serious form of codependency, and that becomes dangerous because then now the individual is almost giving up their whole entire identity, and they're becoming meshed with the other person. And I remember when you and I have talked about this before, you should be able to collaborate, not integrate, because you're still two individual people. But when you get together in a relationship, you collaborate your ideas, your hopes, your dreams, and you build those together. But in the event of your death, it shouldn't be now, I'm like, well, Richard's dead. What am I going to do? Oh, God, what am I going to do with my life? That's it. I died too, right? That is not a healthy mentality. So again, if you have your best friend is the one that you should be able to talk to and build these things with. But I am still I, and you are still you. And my identity is not because of you, and you are not because of me. Because in any bad habit I have, you're going to pick it up as well. That's basically what it is.
Yeah.
If I am I because you are you, then it's almost become like godlike, and you're my little image and I'm your little image, and that's dangerous.
Well, and I think it brings up, it kind of highlights three kind of general categories that sometimes you'll find that people will fall into. Two really problematic ones being dependency or codependency. And again, as you were saying, that last one that is more effective is interdependent. But dependency sort of being, say,
Sure. It's just me.
Yeah, but again, that dependency, right? If I'm, say, dependent on another person, that other person might sort of be like, wow, Richard's getting kind of annoying. He's kind of like attached to my leg. He kind of won't like fuck off. And it's kind of like that person who sends like 100 text messages and you're kind of like being creeped out by this person, right? That kind of
You gotta block him for a bit.
Yeah, that could kind of be like that dependent, right? That codependent, and oftentimes I think we see this a lot with especially abusive relationships, where there's that codependency. Where I remember I was describing a client that I was having some difficulties with, where they were saying to me like, I'm having difficulty getting into a relationship because I'm in this relationship right now, which she described it, and she said like, oh yeah, it's really good. He's like supportive and everything. I said, what's the problem? And they were saying, I'm used to being in an abusive relationship, and they were saying, I remember my previous partner would say, well, I hit you because I love you. I'm trying to make you a better person, right? So
makes total sense.
Yeah. So what they were sort of associating was, well, they love me, and the abuse comes because of love. So if somebody abuses me, they love me, right? So what was happening was they were describing that, say, I would feel neglected, and I would feel like they don't even recognize that I'm around, right? So I would irritate them, so they would hit me, and then I would feel loved again, right? And it was, of course, obviously problematic. I don't think anybody would sort of say like, I don't see what the problem is there.
No.
So they were saying, now I'm in this other relationship where my partner's actually supportive, and I don't actually know what to do. I'm confused. Do they really love me? Are they using me for something? Or like they were kind of like, I don't know really what to do. And that codependency can kind of be like, say, I want you to be dependent on me, and it makes me feel good. It sort of boosts my ego. It makes me feel valuable because you're so dependent on me. And there's that really kind of dangerous codependency. And then again, what you were highlighting, that interdependency being, say, again, you are you, I am I, and it's kind of, again, that collaboration versus, again, that complete sort of merging.
And exactly, right? And when you look at the best friend, because again, a relationship to the core, it is the best friend from everything there you build on. You want to make sure that your best friend is just that, your best friend, and not your heir, right? And you have to be able to identify whether that's turning into codependency, or whether you're turning into completely just being independent, because both of those are dangerous as well. And again, we should be independent in where I should be able to shower, wake up, do my own things that are necessary for me. But so when we talk about independence, we're talking about those things. But when we talk about, for example, an emotional, you should be interdependent, because again, if you have a best friend, I should be able to go to my best friend and talk to them and tell them in the relationship what is going on and what is bothering me, versus we have a lot of the mentality is, well, no, I don't like to bother them. Oh, I can handle it myself. Yeah, I bet you can handle it yourself. But then that's not functionable in a relationship. Because for every time I hear somebody say, oh, well, no, I can handle it myself, I don't need their help, they're also acting out throughout the relationship and not realizing that while to their normal friends, let's say they were just in a normal friendship relationship, they're like, you know what, guys, I'm going through something right now. I just need some time to sort it out. You can't actually say that to your partner if you're cohabitating with them or if you're married to them, because then what you're basically saying is, look, I'm going to ignore you for a few hours or for a few days. You're good with that, right? Right? Don't worry about it. When I'm ready, if I feel like telling you, I'll let you know. But for the next few days, do you mind just fucking off and not talking to me for a little bit? You know, that works in friends. That doesn't work in a relationship.
But then I think the other thing to highlight as well is if there's not that open dialogue where, say, I feel comfortable that I can speak to that person, is that, say, I might begin to act out, and maybe that person's thinking like themselves like, wow, Richard's being a real bastard, right? And they're not unaware of all the other crap going on in my head because, say, I'm not articulating that to that person.
And think about it again. If you correlate that to business, let's say you and I were having a business problem and I chose not to tell you about it. I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to tell Richard. I'm just going to keep it to myself. And Richard, I just need a few days to figure stuff out. And you're like, well, no, that doesn't. That would be detrimental because one, you have no clue then what's going on in between regarding that problem in the business, and then two, I'm running off to figure it out on my own. How does that make business partners?
No.
It's in the same way. How does that make romantic partners effective if they're part of that relationship? I remember growing up, I had this mentor, Dr. Jorge Falero. So Falero is a psychiatrist in New York City, and I told you tons and tons of stories about him when I was growing up. And Falero did a lot of couples counseling. And he talked a lot about.
That's like the majority when you bring up his insights comes from couples.
Yeah, and because he did a lot of that, and I remember I don't know. I think I told you when one day he had these couples, imitate each other. Like what do I look like to you, and what do you look like to me, right? And I found that interesting because the whole point of that, when you were looking at that, they were basically imitating behaviors of the other individual as to how I see you and you see me. And one of the things he was always very big on, a proponent, was of communication, constantly opening up and talking. Because remember, he gave the story about the butterfly. So he had given the story that there was this couple who recently had just gotten married. And they were lying in bed that morning. And she woke up and she saw a butterfly in the bedroom. At that moment, she got up to go grab the butterfly. Her husband had turned over and he was going to put his arm around her. But as in the moment he was doing that, it just so happened, luck be a lady or a bastard, she saw this butterfly and she gets up. So she never realized that he turned over, to snuggle her. And he never realized that she saw that butterfly. So he took that as a rejection. So she went over and he never saw what she was doing because at this point he got upset, he got up and he went to the bathroom. She never realized what was happening there. So she went, got the butterfly, took it and put it out the window. So from there on, he felt rejected. So for that day, he acted up. And then she didn't understand what was going on and he didn't tell that to her, so she started acting up. Well, this turned into weeks, which turned into months, which eventually turned into, we want to get a divorce because, and so they ended up in Falero's office.
Literally the butterfly effect.
Literally, 100%. This is like a butterfly effect. And so they ended up in Falero's office, and Falero basically, at that point, had said, and as he was breaking it down to them, he had said the biggest problem that happened here was that had he just said to her, hey, what happened there? She could have turned around and said, what do you mean? Didn't you see the butterfly? And right there, that conversation that would have ended and those feelings of hurt would have been like, oh, yeah, you're right. We've all had those moments when someone's called us out or something and we're like, oh, yeah, that makes total sense. But deep down inside, we're like, damn, I was so wrong in what I was feeling. And we never admit it. We just keep it to ourselves. But he never did. And that communication almost caused a complete marriage breakdown. And because, again, she never really asked either, hey, what's going on? She just went on basically carrying on whatever emotion he was carrying. She then went back and retaliated as well. And one of the things Falero always used this story, and I found this story always to be so powerful, was because of that. All it took was one simple conversation. Hey, I went to hug you this morning. Why did you just get up and reject me?
Mm-hmm.
And right there, what would have said? Oh, I'm sorry, I saw the butterfly. Oh, you did. Or no, you're such a bitch for doing that. Obviously, no. He would have then realized that whole was a miscommunication. And so I remember him talking about that, and it always made me think, when you're best friends, that is the whole goal of the relationship, that you should be able to tell the other person, even when it's something very hard, hey, this hurt me when you did that. We need to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
But they never did. And I think a lot of marriages or relationships end because of that inability or that fear of saying, this is how you hurt me, because we're so afraid of what's going to come out of that it ends up going that way anyway, because we never express it, and then we end up breaking up or getting a divorce anyway.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that also especially kind of comes into the trust pillar, where I trust that I can say open up and speak to you and things like that, right? But I know for me, I've had a lot of couples talk about, say, that kind of lack of interest, lack of shared interest, that kind of
that's a huge one.
ends up spreading couples apart, right? And I think that would be probably something that really kind of ties into friendship, because it's that idea that, say, you become friends with people initially because there's some kind of shared interest, right? Aside from just, say, values and things like that, but even like I know one of the big things that come up with couples for me is that, say, the couples don't really spend any time together because their interests are almost completely well, but not even, they're like diametrically opposed, where it's kind of like I don't know, I like the winter, I hate the winter, I like the summer, I hate the summer, where it's kind of like diametrically opposed even interests and things like that. And I think that's a really important sort of topic to also bring up when it comes to like the topic of friendship, in terms of, say, shared interests. And what I'm wondering, and say with your experience, Dayana, is, because you agreed, you said you have a lot of clients who sort of come in and tell you the same thing as a lot of mine do, that say we share no interests together. What do you tell them?
So, growing up, we've all heard that term, right? Opposites attract, right?
Yeah,
well, in relationships, that's just bullshit.
Yeah.
And the reason why that's bullshit was because exactly like what you said. If you and I share nothing together, then what actually are we doing all day together? On Saturday and Sunday, what are we doing? Are you going to your family's house? Am I going to my family's house? Am I going to my friend's house? Are you going to your friend's house? Are you hanging out in the backyard? Am I hanging out indoors? And we're just not talking for the next 8 hours, hoping that the weekend goes by quickly. That way I don't have to put up with you. Right? So what happens during that time? So when people say, well, opposites attract, I'm like, that's the most dangerous thing, because it's what you said. When you do actually get in a relationship with them, it ends up being that if there's nothing that you like to do that I like to do, and there's nothing that I like to do that you like to do, so what are we doing together?
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that, especially in couples, we've noticed is that if there is no shared interest, like what you said, at the end of the day, that is one of the most biggest and problematic things. Because let's say, for example, and sure, I have seen couples where there's certain things that they don't align on, but there's other things that they do. Let's say you're a Buddhist and I'm a Christian. Okay, maybe we would not share completely the same religious beliefs, but as long as you keep to you and I keep to me, and we're not trying to convert each other, we can still maybe find some common ground in there, right? But let's say you're an outdoor person, as a biggest example. You like the outdoors, you like kayaking, you like snowboarding, you like, riding bikes all day, you like doing all these outdoor activities all the time, and I am a home in-body person. At some point, you're going to be resentful when I don't ever want to go with you, or I'm like, oh, Richard, do we really have to do that again? Like, I don't like doing that. So then you're going to stop doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're going to be like, wow, because of this girl, now I can't really do this as much as I like, because I feel guilty going and leaving her, but she never wants to do anything with me. So why should I be sitting at home all day? This is boring.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like doing this. So when you look at relationships in that aspect, and that's whenever I ask them, do you guys have any shared interests? A lot of times you hear them say, yeah, no, we don't. We do nothing together. So again, think back on your on a platonic best friend relationship, right? When you have a best friend platonic wise, you love doing things with them. That's why you're best friends, because you guys hang out together. You guys do this together. You guys have shared activities. But then again, translate that now into a business. If you and I have separate business goals, separate business ideas, separate business idealities. How are we running this business together?
Mhm.
Right? If you believe that we should all be all inpatient and I believe we should all be outpatient, how is that lining up?
Mhm.
Right? At some point, what are you going to say? Well, forget it, Dana. I'll just run the complete outpatient. You won't have any clue what happens there, and you can run the whole complete inpatient, and I don't have to have any clue what happens there. That's the worst type of business you're looking at.
But in a way, it can be complementary in the sense that, say, we can run, say, 2 separate programs, right? I would say one of...
But you should still have an interest as to what happens on the other end.
I agree, but to an extent, I would say perhaps, I don't know if this would maybe be more of an accurate example in terms of, say, trying to draw the analogy into couples, is sort of like if I want to build a big practice and I want to open up more practices and more locations, and you say, you know what, I'm really uncomfortable with that idea. It's way too risky. I just want to stay as... say 2 practitioners in one small building and just never grow because it's just way too risky.
Yeah, you're gonna
right?
feel like I'm stifling you, and I'm gonna feel like you're
I'm pushing
risking
you.
me,
Yeah.
into things I don't feel comfortable with, and that's exactly how in a romantic relationship it can turn out.
Mhm.
And so that's why, as you're saying, the interest levels are highly important. But again, if this is your best friend, you should have asked these questions, or let alone figured this out before you started dating them. That you can pretend at the beginning, oh, Richard likes kayaking. Okay, I can't swim, but I'll pretend that I'll go with him. And at some point, you're going to be like, okay, now we're fully dating. Okay, great. Look, I don't like to do this shit, so I'm not doing it anymore. Then you're going to be like, wait, but what's up? You're going to feel like you've been lied to.
Yeah.
Right? Well, and I hear that all the time. Well, they used to like to do it back then. Really, honestly, the truth is, no, I really didn't. I just did it for you.
Mm-hmm.
And then now they feel like, oh, wow, that's not cool.
Mm-hmm.
So this is why I always tell people, be honest at the beginning about your interests. Because again, interest and personality still do count. And if they are not the same, be straight. Because unless this person is going to be okay with that, they're going to eventually end up getting bored or resentful with you.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I guess I'm wondering from your perspective, Dana, let's say again, you have the couple come in and, they're talking about, say, these interests, and we're looking for interest, but again, our interests are diametrically kind of like opposed. What would you suggest then?
So at that point, I would suggest actually that they make a list of what they do have in common, because it has to be something. Mm-hmm. Generally, when you find nothing, that's when it is going towards a divorce, because really you both have no more interest in each other. So as an example, I'll go back to Falero. Falero's remarried now, but at that time he was married to a different individual. And Falero had told me, this was years ago, I was like in my teens, like 13, 14. He had said a story that his wife loved to go shoe shopping. He hated shoe shopping. He just hated it. He said, however, he did it anyway, not because of her, but because he knew that it would bring her joy and put a smile on his face. And being, again, in a giving relationship, he was willing to give this part of his time for her, because in return, she would do other things for him that while she fully may not have enjoyed it, but she did it with the love in her heart. It wasn't like, oh, God, this bastard. Okay, I'm going to go put up with this for the next, so-and-so. No, like there was, and again, the intent, right? We talked about this all the time. There has to be, what is the intention, right? Mm-hmm. So he said, I will take her to as many shoe stores as it takes, because I know that makes her happy, and that will make me happy in return. As much as I hate the activity, I love how she feels about it. Mm-hmm. And that was powerful in the way he worded that. Mm-hmm. Versus, okay, I'm just going to do it, to shut her the hell up. And, okay, we're done, thank God. That for that point, the intention is completely wrong. Mm-hmm. And you might as well not go anyway. So generally with couples, that is what I look for. What is the, what are their shared values there, or their shared interests? And then what is the intention they're going in with? So if they're still willing to do it for the other person, that's workable, as long as, again, the intent is correct. Mm-hmm. But if they really have nothing at all and they're two just, polar opposites, then that actually really makes it bit difficult, because then what is there to talk about ever? Mm-hmm. Because remember, what is the main thing about having shared interests? You talk about them. It isn't just doing them. You're not two mute people. You also come home and you talk about them. You develop them. You make them grow. Like, oh, you like skydiving? Oh, I like skydiving too. How about we go skydiving at 10,000 feet? Hey, next week, why don't we try 20? You keep growing on that shared interest, that shared value. But if it doesn't exist, well, you like skydiving? Good, have fun. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You have life insurance, right? We're set. Go.
Yeah. Well, and with the shoe shopping example, one thing that kind of stood out to me was it wasn't so much the activity, but the participation, right? And again, I'm not trying to again play with semantics or anything like that, but it's sort of like I don't enjoy the activity, but participating in the activity brings me joy because I don't get shoes out of it because I could give a shit about the shoes, but I get something else out of it,
which is seeing my partner happy and loved.
Where I guess and I don't know if this would be a good example. Like you mentioned, like say kayaking, right? And let's assume that both people know how to swim. Let's say if you don't like kayaking, but you know what, you like seeing your partner happy kayaking, and at the same time too, you're like, I'm not crazy about kayaking, but I like exercise, so at least I'm getting exercise out of it. Where it's sort of like,
yes,
I'm still getting something out of it. I'd rather be snowboarding than I don't like snowboarding, but I'd rather say be snowboarding than kayaking. But I'm still getting something out of it than instead of like I'm resentful that my partner is making me kayak, right?
Yeah, and this is why it's important to in a relationship when you look at trying to build the best friend relationship, you need to figure out your shared values and beliefs in everything. Because some people have two separate religious beliefs, but no one is trying to push anybody, and they respect each other and they participate in. Okay, great, you're doing well. But if you have same thing, two separate people with two religious beliefs, it's like, no, you're wrong, you're going to hell. No, you're wrong, you're going to hell. Why the hell did you get together in the first place then? Right? Were you hoping to change the person? Oh, it's okay. I'll start dating Richard and eventually he'll give up snowboarding for me. That's actually very manipulative.
I was going to say
extremely manipulative. You went in thinking you were going to change the person for you. That's actually a very manipulative thought. And I always tell people, when you decide to get into a relationship with someone, furthermore, if you decide to live with them and or marry them, what you're saying is not that I'm going to change you, but it's that I'm willing to take everything of you, the good and the bad, and deal with it for the rest of my life. That's exactly what you're saying. If you're saying, oh, I'm gonna get with you, I'm gonna move in with you, or I'm going to marry you, and you're gonna change for me, or I'm gonna change you, then again, that's extremely manipulative, and you went and lied. And then what happens? Nobody changes, and the person's like, you know what? I want a divorce because they've never changed. You're right, they haven't, because to the core, that's who they are. What right did you have to change them? I always tell people, unless there's a maladaptive behavior, like the individual's abusive. We're talking about drugs, alcohol, things like that. Who they are.
Participate in my. I enjoy, like, say, smoking coke. We should do it together.
Yeah, sacrificing little, baby puppies, like things like that. If that stuff isn't going on, but just my personality doesn't align with yours, but my personality still is of decent quality, where I'm not out there interested in, shady things or doing shady stuff. You have no right to change me. Because this is who I am as a person, and this is who you are. And if our personalities don't line up, that's okay. You don't have to like the color black. I have to like the color black. But if it bothers you that I like the color black and you're hoping to change that, then you shouldn't have in any way have started dating me. Character's a different story. If I'm to the core a rotten person and you're hoping, well, first of all, why you even would get with someone like that beats me. But if you were hoping
because I'm sorry to cut you off, but it's kind of like that savior.
Yeah, I was just about to say that. Yeah. If you were hoping to do like a savior syndrome, you still went in all the wrong ways. So you need to have these values lined up, and that's what causes a best friend relationship in a romantic setting. Excuse me, where both of you are able to share these things together, but you also go in very honestly. I once heard somebody say, if someone tells you who they are, believe them, because that's exactly who they are. So we have the really bad habit, if someone says, look, I'm an asshole, we're like, no, you're not, Richard. You're a great human being and God loves you. Yeah, that might be all somewhat true, but if deep down you describe yourself as an asshole, that's because something in you to the core believes that, and you probably have characteristics or personalities, behavior that are going to tend to lean more towards that. So when I look at you and say, God, Richard, you're such an asshole, I always tell the other person, but you're right. They told you that. So you should be able to say, yes, Dayana, yes, I am. And I've told you that. It shouldn't be a shock. But the problem is, again, is we go in either not believing what the person said or wanting to change the person. In friendships, it doesn't work that way. You have to take them for who they are, and those maladaptive behaviors, if you don't like them, then you either got to learn how to deal with them, or you need to talk with them about it, seeing if they're ready to change that. And if they're not, then it's your decision whether or not you want to stay there.
Now, you said something when you were talking about, like, say, manipulative behaviors and everything like that. And you said a word that kind of popped out to me, which I don't think you meant to say. And the reason why I bring it up, because you saying it kind of triggered a thought for me that I remember hearing from you, is you said, I go and I should take that person for the best and the worst and just be able to deal with their personality, right? And I remember you said something to me before that really stood out when we were first talking about, like, say, couples therapy.
Well, do tell. I like it when I say something impacting.
Yeah, which, like I said, I don't think you meant to say this word. I think you slipped up, and that's why I want to correct it, because I remember you highlighted you should never deal with somebody in a relationship. You said it's kind of like, say, I don't deal with you as a person. It's that, say, I accept you for who you are.
No, the word was put up. I never used the word to put up with somebody.
Put up. I thought
to deal with you, or to
to deal with you, to put up with you.
Yeah. So to put up, no, because to put up with something is a whole different story. We do have to learn, and that's why I always use the word is put up with. To deal or work with are more of the words that you're using, because to put up with means like whatever, like it is what it is, and when you put up with something, it never sounds like there's any negotiation or correctiveness in that. Because really that's what it is, right? I'm just going to put up with it. Versus, when you're talking about dealing or working with, you're looking for something to be able to, either correct or find a way to make it in your life not acceptable, but like workable. Someone asked a question. If someone tells you, nope, sorry, does that person being an asshole excuse their behavior when they do act like an asshole? Polite. Does that person being an asshole excuse their behavior when they... No. So when someone's an asshole, remember something. Asshole is not a diagnosable, what you would call it,
Sure.
a term or anything. Basically, when you're looking at someone who, and we're just going to use Paulette's words here, when you're looking at someone who's acting like, who's an asshole, and then they're acting like an asshole, so you really have to go to the core of, remember what we always say, we're not really interested in what the behavior is, we're interested in what's fueling the behavior, right? So if the person is being an asshole, and then because of that, they're out of that, they act like one, does that mean we have to excuse their behaviors? No, actually. You never have to excuse somebody's ill-will behavior. But if anything, instead of jumping on it, you want to be able to, if you have a good relationship with this person, whether it be romantically or platonically, to be able to sit down with them and say, hey, can you tell me why you do that? Why do you act like that? And again, pick your times. Don't be in the middle of an explosion with them and be like, hey, let's just have a good conversation here. You want to eventually sit down with them and say, look, when you act like this, it hurts me, it offends me, but I'm just wondering, why do you do that? And many times a person will be able to tell you why they act like that.
Well, and I think one thing that kind of, to me, stands out as well is when somebody says, for instance, oh, well, I'm an asshole, or things like that. I think a lot of our...
First, I always ask, what the hell does that mean, right? Because you want to break it down.
Well, of course, right? Because, again, I don't think asshole's in the dictionary, but dictionaries... the dictionaries don't compile the meaning of words. No, their use in dialogue defines the meaning, right? Because we all have subjective meanings through, say, social constructions, right? So the way I see it is that, say, also, if I internalize myself as, say, an asshole, right? A lot of my perceptions of myself come from my perceived
the looking glass
perceptions of other people. Yeah. Again, exactly. You've heard me say this many times. The looking glass self, right? Where it's that idea that, say, when I look at you, just like when I look at, say, many people, I think a lot of people think I'm an asshole, or a lot of people think I'm stupid, or a lot of people think I'm worthless, or whatever. And I internalize that, even if that's not what they believe. It's really, at the end of the day, it's not important what they believe. It's important of how I interpret what they believe, right? Just as much as they might interpret me as an asshole, and I interpret myself as a demigod, then to me, I'm going to interpret everything that their behaviors as, oh, they think I'm great, or they're jealous. That's why they're calling me an asshole, because they're jealous of me because I'm so great, right?
And then you want to find out what is the thought process or the emotion that's fueling that demigod, that jealousy. People think they're jealous of me behavior.
Mhm.
And yeah, so when I have somebody in the relationship that says, well, I'm just an asshole, that's just who I am,
Yeah.
I always say, well, that's interesting. Tell me what that means, right? And what Pauletta's asking, yeah, no, we don't excuse the behavior with that, but what we use it to is explain the behavior.
Yeah.
And that's what we're looking for, right? So if you're acting inappropriately because you're an asshole, yeah, for sure. It needs to be called out in a proper way. Like, hey, Richard, you're acting inappropriate right now. Let's talk about that. But that doesn't mean I'm saying, oh, that's okay, keep it up. Muffin, we're good.
Yeah.
It gives us a way though to explain. But if you don't allow them or ever understand or hear the explanation, then all you're ever going to see is an asshole versus what you might see is a broken person, a hurt person, a depressed person, an anxious person, right? All of those are what being an asshole for many people, what they think is the parts that they're not seeing.
Mhm.
So that's why it's important that we are able to divulge deep into that in order to understand where the behavior is coming from. Again, we're not interested in the behavior, we're interested in what's fueling it.
Well, again, our perceptions aren't static, they change, right? So when we look at, say, definitions are subject to change. Definitions are constantly, say, redefined and things like that. They're constantly, say, discussed, right? And, I think it's important for us to sort of also identify that I think one of the problems that I oftentimes see with the couples that I have in sessions is a lack of curiosity, right?
Yeah.
In terms of, say, tell me more.
Because we think we know the person. Oh, we've been with them so long, I know them.
Exactly.
I don't have to ask questions anymore.
Right? Like, I remember a few times. I remember even in the military. I remember sometimes somebody in the section. You haven't eaten for several days or slept or anything like that. Sometimes fucking Peter, I just fucking hate you. That's interesting. Tell me more. Because it's kind of like, okay, that's valuable information. You hate me. Tell me more so I can understand, right? And I think, unfortunately, with a lot of couples, I think when people start dating, the initial stages, people are really curious about one another,
Everything,
right?
yeah.
I want to know everything about this person.
What's your shoe size? Yeah.
And then as time goes on, like you said, I think
We
a
still
lot of
ask it.
people think, I know everything,
I don't have to ask.
so I don't have to ask. I'm not as curious because I know this person inside out. But again, the problem is just like the cells in our body are reproducing, right? We're changing. Our thoughts change. We as people change, right? And really, we don't know somebody, say, inside out. We should always be curious about that other person, just like with a friendship, right? Friendships develop. Unfortunately, friendships sometimes spread apart. Sometimes they get closer. And sometimes, again, I would say most times it's kind of like a wave. Sometimes they bend and curve, right? And I think with relationships, it's the same sort of thing. It's sort of like, I think couples need to constantly be interested in one another because that interest is going to fuel dialogue.
I recently saw someone post up on Instagram, Dr. Jessica O'Reilly. She is a sexologist, and she had said, when you're looking in your relationship, at least once a week, you should ask your partner, hey, check in. How are you doing? Either today or this week. Yeah. How are you doing? Either today or this week. Is there anything you need, or is there anything you need from me? And the final question is, how do you think our relationship went this week? Right? Because, sure, while we don't actually, measure relationships, within 7-day intervals, nonetheless, it makes easier sense to figure out because generally within a week, a lot happens, right? And I found those 3 things to be quite actually interesting because it's true. A lot of us don't do that. The only time we say, hey, how are you doing is when you're already in a huge fight or broken. And
usually not asking how you're doing.
No.
Usually making a claim, right?
So that's why I found that so the 3 things you should ask is, how are you doing? Is there anything you need or need from me? And how is our relationship doing this week to you? Again, because it's your perception, right? And the main thing is the other individual should be able to ask the other person as well. And both people need to be honest. Like what you said, you need to be curious. Because from the outside, I can't assume you're doing well. I need to know you're doing well or you're doing bad. But you are the only one who can tell me that because we all put up a facade every day, right? And even to many times our partners, we don't want to tell them the truth. So this is why the friendship aspect is very, very important. And the same way you would check in with your best friend, or hopefully you do, platonic best friend, you should check in even more with your romantic person, especially if you live with them or are married to them, because they're the first person you see in the morning and generally the last person you'll see at night.
Mhm.
So if you have no clue how they've done in the last 24 hours, yeah, then maybe you guys should consider getting counseling, because that communication there is, is being broken down.
And I think, you said a key word too. Assumptions are very, very dangerous, right? I see you smiling because I think I want to bring up a mentor of mine, a section commander I had in the military, who told me when we were doing breaching, he said, remember P10, don't ever assume anything, because assumptions are like is like farting and finding out you shit your pants, right? And I think oftentimes and
we will not be quoting that up there.
Yeah, and no, but it's a beautiful quote, right? Because you know what? Think of it this way. Yeah, of course. You know what? If I don't have my kit sorted out, if I didn't say, if I'm not situationally aware, anything like that, if I'm making a bunch of assumptions, you know what? Some of them might be farts, right? They might be little slip-ups. And sometimes I'm going to fart, and I'm going to shit my pants, and people are going to fucking die, right?
Yeah.
In a relationship, it's the same kind of way. We might make assumptions, and they might just turn out to be farts.
Like back to the little story.
Yeah.
That one was actually shitting.
That was the
Which
fart that
is-
turned into like shitting the bed, right?
Yeah.
So what happens is I think, and that's why I said it is a beautiful quote, because it really sums down, I would say, a lot of what happens in life, right? That say, I think we make a lot of assumptions, right? And I think oftentimes assumptions get us by. Heuristics, right? It gets us by because there's just so much information we're trying to take in our daily lives that half the time, yeah, we are making assumptions, right? But I think sometimes, again, we have to sort of be curious and not just assume, but actually ask, right?
Yeah, and it's so we already reached the hour, so with that we're closed. But the main part about that also is also making sure that you also examine yourself, and also are willing to tell the truth when your partner does have an interest and should every day in asking how you're doing, being able to reciprocate that by actually telling the truth. Because if we don't open up about that, we're like, no, I'm fine, everything's fine, and then you're acting out. It's again just adding more stress to the friendship, which then I have to go back to. And then next week we'll talk about that, which is trust.
Yeah.
If I trust you and you trust me, I should be able to tell you what's happening in me and in this relationship. But if I don't trust you, or I don't trust me, then I'm not going to tell you, and then we're going to continue down that broken road.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I completely agree with you. And that's when it comes to the give and take, right? I have to be able to trust that you'll hear me and you'll see me. And recently I read something that said, when your partner tells you something bad is going on, whatever you're doing at that moment, completely stop, look at your partner and say, you know what, I'm here, so tell me, what is it you need? Talk to me. But what they had said, the key thing is making sure you stopped everything instead of, I'm here, so tell me what's up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm listening.
And logically, it's impossible to multitask.
And so they had said, if you're able to do that for your best friend, because many times we do. I've sat down many times, when growing up, when horrific things have happened to my best friends, I'd be like, yeah, tell me what's up. In the same way we do for our patients. We're able to sit down and focus on them. You should be able to laser focus on your partner, because those 5 minutes you give them could be the world for them.
Mm-hmm.
Versus many times we're like, yeah, just tell me what's up and I'm going to watch the TV and leave it on. So this is why it's important, and next week we'll talk about that, is the trust. You build trust by not just saying certain things, but doing certain things. And next week we'll discuss that, which is the second pillar in relationship. The first one is friendship, and the next one you build on. Once you have that friendship, which leads into the best friends, it's because of the trust that was embedded in there. So if you guys have any questions or anything, you guys can feel free to email us, call us, or book an appointment, because we do couples counseling. And this is something that we're constantly working on and developing, for the betterment of our patients. So thank you guys for watching, and I hope you guys have a great weekend.